everyone. Welcome to the second installment of our monthly feature series where we take a break from military news coverage and get to know a member of the community. And today, my guest is Rachel Brenke. She is a business consultant, attorney, author, keynote speaker, athlete, cancer survivor. The list just goes on and on. And did I mention she's also a mom of 5 school-age children? So that's quite the feat. She's one of those people, when I was reading her bio, I was like, how does she do it all? And today maybe we'll get that answer. So Rachel, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm going to give a spoiler now. I don't do it all very good all the time. Like it takes a lot of discipline and grace and patience with yourself. But yeah, it's good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I know I just gave some of the highlights of your bio, but I would love for you to tell us more about you, your current work, what you're focusing on now, as well as your military spouse background and how that plays into all of what you do.
Yeah, so I actually was born into a military family. Dad was Air Force for 24 years, then married Army for 10 and a half. He is medically retired now, but we still live in a military community. A lot of my friends and connections are still there, and I still want to serve military spouses. I actually started entrepreneurship when my husband was active duty deploying in and out to Iraq. We only had one kid at the time. That was about the time that I had the cancer. I almost said scare, but I actually did have it. The scary part was wondering if I was going to get over it, and I did. But in that process, I was like, well, if I get through this, then I want to make sure that I am going to be padding my pockets of goals and dreams and all that sort of stuff and not somebody else's. And at the time, there was not a lot of information available. So I was trying to set up an online apparel store, try to be flexible, be there for my son. And there just was not a lot of information. This was the MySpace age. I'm going to date myself a little bit. We didn't have the onslaught of freemium information like we do now, podcast and Pinterest was not even in existence, Instagram, any of that. So one of the things that I started doing while I got into different industries and learned how to be a business owner, an entrepreneur in different industries, was also gathering all that information and identifying my failures, identifying my successes so that I could share with others, especially military spouses, because at the time there was not a lot of support. In fact, I remember going to family readiness group meeting and they were like, what, you work for yourself? Like, how does that work? And it just was a foreign concept. And I love now that it's more readily accepted. And we've definitely seen through like pandemic in the last year that it's even more imperative. But what I love about doing what I do is that I've done it before. So I'm not just a business coach or consultant that is just trying to teach you how to run business, and I've never done it. I've done
Mhm.
it and I'm still doing it. I have a law firm, obviously licensed attorney. I have a law firm where we do a lot of copyright and trademark work. And then under my other brands, it's all like business consulting, legal information, business strategy, really so that anybody, including military spouses, can have the real business to have the real life they want, however they picture it. And yeah, that's my goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you find yourself pursuing entrepreneurship because of the military lifestyle and just moving around a lot?
I think that's part of it. I mean, I always kind of knew growing up that I wasn't meant for like a 9 to 5 cubicle farm type of thing. And then marrying into military and automatically, like right off the bat, he was deploying and we had a kid and my family needed me around a bit more. It inspired me, but it also forced me at the same time to really kick it into high gear and figure out what I needed to do to be successful. And I love that. And, I actually really love working with military spouses little bit more than my civilian counterparts. Don't tell them. But that's because military spouses are so ready and prepared and know how to respond to change. When failures happen, it's not such a traumatic, dramatic experience. They might have their moments, but then they're like, okay, what went wrong? How do we fix this? I mean, we've had that from orders being pulled to, PCSing within 6 months of being at a place. So we're used to that kind of change. And yeah, military dependency as a child, then spouse really did set me up and help to put me into a mindset of entrepreneurship that I really attribute and love. I mean, it sucked at the time having to go through that stuff, but I really enjoy that I had those experiences.
Mhm. Well, you talked about being a cancer survivor as well, and from what I've seen on in some of your writing, that diagnosis was really a motivator for you to pursue your passions. Can you share that story and what that time was like for you?
It's actually like the most epitome of like military story, I think. I had found a lump in my throat while I was 20, and pregnant with our first. And of course, in young person fashion, you're like, that'll never happen to me. And husband was getting ready to deploy. And I was like, oh, I'm just not going to worry about it. It just go away on its own, right? Well, by the time he came home from deployment, it had grown larger and I had been seeing other symptoms and issues. Finally went to get it taken care of. And when they did a regular biopsy, it came back inconclusive. They really weren't sure. So they said, okay, let's go ahead and do like the full surgery and take part of in your throat, your thyroid, and other lymph nodes and stuff. We'll just take part of it out to test. This is where the military part comes in. So you see on movies where people will get called into the doctor's offices, they hold your hand, put the box of tissues, and they tell you have cancer. No, here, my husband's gone for training. I'm at home with the little one, and they just had some random hospital operator call me and be like, "Oh, I need to schedule to take out your malignant tumor." And I'm like, "Come again?" It just so happened somehow she didn't know. She was so apologetic and I felt
Mhm.
bad for her. She didn't know that she was the one giving me this news until I was like, say what? And then I went back, had the rest taken out, did treatments, and I've been fine since, been in remission. That's been 15 years approximately. So yeah, it was just interesting. But yeah, like I mentioned before, the biggest thing of that was um, realizing obviously you're not immortal. Something can happen even at the age of 20. But if I get through this, I want to live life on my terms, which sounds so cliche, but so many of us, just because of the way that society and culture has kind of ingrained it, that you go to school, maybe you go to college, you go work a 9 to 5, and you have to do in a mainstream way. And I've never been a mainstream type person, and the cancer really pushed me, as well as the military lifestyle, to embrace that. I have that unconventional attitude that is so great for entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously a big challenge. And then we've seen in the last year, 2020, now into 2021, it's just been riddled with challenges. We've seen many small businesses suffer, some close for good. We saw many, many people lose their jobs, including some military spouses, maybe even some that you know.
Mm-hmm.
Nationally, research shows, of course, that the pandemic has had a disproportionate effect on women in careers than men. And I've kind of seen that in my own life. Like I've had to put some of my professional career on pause because
Mm-hmm.
I'm, the main child caregiver, whatever you want to call me. I'm the mom, right?
The
So
mom.
what has 2020 been like for you? I mentioned you have 5 kids, 5 school age kids. So what is your life like right now? How are you kind of balancing everything?
So this is a difficult question to answer because I don't want to come across and sound like I'm unsympathetic to those that have had to quit careers. They've only survived and not thrived in the last year into 2021. So before I go into how it's been for me, understand this was years and years of hard work that I got to see the dividends this year.
Sure.
And so for me, I didn't have too much of an interruption in my businesses. In fact, I had the best years ever in my businesses because we were already, all of them are already virtual. I mean, we do have a brick and mortar office for the law firm, but everything's primarily online. So we didn't have any lag time. We didn't have to rearrange, get new resources, and I was able to be here to figure out the homeschooling thing, which my gosh, teachers, God, I love you. Oh, it's not for me, that's for sure. I love teaching business, but God, you give me science, it's not happening. And so for me, it's been a relatively professionally successful year that just has been a result of years of hard work. Now, that being said, I've seen a lot of people that have had to have their careers stalled or they lost their jobs completely. I've seen others that have taken that, especially military spouses, and it's almost like this is their cancer moment. Like mine
Sure.
was, oh, if I get through this, I'm going to do what I want to do with my life. I am seeing these stories, and again, not that I'm unsympathetic, but I'm encouraged with the resiliency and the pivoting that I've seen of many who are in the pandemic. This has hit them very difficult, but they're looking at it going, okay, now's my time to do what I want. If it's a career change, it's to become an entrepreneur. And I'm encouraged by that. And so that's been the biggest thing that I've seen this year that's taught me a lot in entrepreneurship. It just reminded me how resilient entrepreneurs, especially military spouses, can be.
I want you to take this time to brag. Like when you talk about your successes for 2020, like what has been really awesome for you?
I feel so bad because I know so many are hurting. I all my businesses, like I said, have been the best years that we've ever had. We broke through some seven-figure ceilings on some of them, and we have very lean teams. But even then, I have done hiring, bonuses, pay increases during the year. None of my team obviously had to be let go. We added people on. And what I loved, and I think it's probably the thing I'm most proud of here, has really nothing to do with me in except that I provided all the people that work for me no interruption in their income and their career. They all have the flexibility. Almost all the people that work for me are moms. And so what I was also having to do schooling from home, they're having to do the same. And I just love that years ago, I had it in my mind that my vision of a real business was virtual, flexible on my time schedule. So I did the things to get there. Not only did that help me this year, but it allowed me to give that gift, if you will, to my team members so that they could focus on their family and thrive this year and blossom professionally with me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And like I said, take this time to brag. I give you the
Appreciate
permission.
it. Thank you.
Uh, so to piggyback off of that, what are some tips for other working moms or military spouses out there who might be struggling in their careers or their business and maybe trying to balance remote schooling with, some of the other household duties
Mhm.
as well as career and entrepreneurship things as well?
This
That's
is
not
the
entrepreneurship.
Entrepreneurial,
Entrepreneurship.
yes, no. This is one of the areas that military spouses seem to thrive the most. Again, Semper Gumby, right? We're always able to be flexible and everything. And but it's funny you asked that question because right before we got on here, I got a text from the school that was like, "We've extended 2 more weeks of all virtual." They had gone back like a couple of days, and it gave a little reprieve, and they got to have interaction. But then so you're asking me, and the answer that popped in my head when you said that was, well, be flexible. You don't know what'll happen. And then the school text right before we're talking, and it's like, surprise, your plans for the next 3 weeks are completely foiled. But yeah, it to me, I think the biggest thing is to understand and accept that no matter how hard you try to schedule and control it, you don't have ultimate control. So you have your plan, you have your backup, and just be flexible and give yourself grace with it. One of the things that I started to see during pandemic trying to do the schooling from home, I set an intention at the very beginning. I wanted to make sure that I scaled back as much as I could on business or rearranged my schedule because I schedule everything. That's another big point here. I schedule everything the much I can with flexibility in mind because in that time, I wanted to be able to intentionally be there to help my kids with the schooling from home because I didn't want them to hate school. I didn't want them, they're so young, to start resenting it. And it's not their fault. We're in pandemic and doing virtual learning. So I use that as an example to say, set an intention for what the most important things are to you. And it's funny, I used to even talk about this before pandemic, and it kind of shifted a little bit during pandemic in that obviously learning from home became like a big priority on the scheduler for the day. I look at our time and our life like a glass jar. And I do this every year. I think, what are the biggest rocks that I have that are most important? And you can visualize this like your calendar. For me, it's self care. So I try to always go for a run or do a workout in the morning. That's really important. Obviously, the kid stuff, like the learning from home, is a big rock. My relationships and things like that. So those go into the vase first. Then we take sand, which is all the other obligations we have to do. Obligations to friends, obligations to your career or business, doctor's appointment, whatever. And then we pour it in. And so I look at my schedule in the same way. I schedule in the big rocks and make sure, like every morning, my team knows I don't do any appearances or any client meetings before noon because I need the flexibility with the kids plus be able to work out. And by having that structure, I mean, it's not perfect, but having that structure allows for achieving quote unquote balance, right? And I wish that I wish there was a way to kind of really define balance as what I'm saying here, putting the priority, the most important things first, then whatever you get to, you get to. Not that we actually have to give equal investment of time and resources and energy and success into all the things that we have.
Yeah, I think balance is key. What are some, you talked about, scheduling and being really organized. Like, what are some practical ways for doing that, I guess?
like I said, I have a recurring meeting invitation with myself every morning. And with me having multiple businesses, I have different days that I work on different businesses. And I actually normally carve out Mondays and Fridays. I don't do appearances because they're spillover days. Like here, life happened and we weren't able to schedule, record when we originally scheduled. And so I was able to move it around. And that allows for also a bit of flexibility and balance. So when you're scheduling everything, be purposeful with those rocks that are important to you, but don't jam pack the schedule. Simply because there's an open time doesn't mean you have to fill it with something. Because I think as entrepreneurs, especially myself, definitely myself, we are passionate, we are excited, we get an idea and we want to get it out on paper. But just because you have an idea or want to take a business opportunity, come on a podcast or do an interview or create a new product or whatever it is, you don't have to always do it just because the opportunity presents itself. So, with the scheduling of stuff, make sure you protect your time, protect your rocks, but also give yourself the permission to be able to say, not right now to an opportunity. You don't have to say no, but like maybe we couldn't have gotten this done, just too much is going on. I wouldn't have told you no. I'd have said, hey, can we circle around in like 2 months? Whenever I know that I'm going to be able to give the best of me to that, because I tried that before. And actually, this approach is what I work on with a lot of my entrepreneurs who feel like they have to offer everything. So maybe they're also a business coach and they're like, I have to have a podcast and a book and a webinar and all the socials. And I'm like, you're going to be spread so thin on all of that. You're not going to be good in any of them. Pick two. And I make them. I'm like, pick two things to focus on and become an expert at. And I think it's the same thing in like your business life or your personal life. To mirror is pick the things that are most important and really maximize and make those really good, and then maybe you can bring in other stuff later on, but don't kill yourself trying to do it all.
Mhm. You mentioned podcasting. That was one thing that I don't think I had touched on in your bio. You have a pretty successful podcast. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so what's funny, I know, and by the way, I am fully aware that some people are going to go to my website and they're going to go, well, she has a book and she has a podcast and she has all this and she just said not to. What I mean by that is I didn't do all those at one time. I am 15, 16 years into this. So I didn't start out the gate with all of those. But my podcast, yes, I love it. It's called The Business Bites. It's quick education for busy entrepreneurs. As you can tell, I talk really fast. So within like 12 to 15-minute episodes, it's probably about as much and, better quality information than hour long. But it came out of I wanted to get information into the hands of those that I want to serve, those that I want to be able to have a life in business like I do, whatever their real business, real life is. And I was finding that blogging was taking too long for me. I'd always had this idea to do it and then I didn't do it. And I just love to talk and it's a good way to connect. So we created the podcast, push it out. Moms can listen to it when they're driving to pick up kids from school, when it's not quarantine, when they're doing laundry. But it doesn't have to be like this big intensive thing because a lot of entrepreneurs don't work on their business. They work in their business and they don't stop and take the time to have the education to learn. And often it's because it's time prohibitive. You sit down, you buy a course, and all of a sudden it's 400 hours. You don't have 400 hours. Whereas I like being able to teach on the podcast, give them actionable tips. And with it being 12 to 15 minutes, my hope is that the listener carved out 30 for education. They'll get about 15 minutes to be able to actually work on that specific topic. Yeah, and it's not, we don't really take sponsors. It really is just a free educational tool so people can see my education. You can get the education information you need, and then maybe come into the other resources that we have.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, Rachel, this has been really wonderful. Where can our listeners find you, follow you, and maybe get some information on how they can hire you?
Yeah, for sure. So rachelbrenke.com is like the mothership website. You'll find all the businesses and information there. I'm also Rachel Brenke, really mostly heavily on Facebook and Instagram, sometimes Twitter when like political season or something big's going on, I'll get on there and rant a little bit. But yeah, if y'all have any questions, anything that I talked about here, if you want help finding some information about being a military spouse, as an entrepreneur, whatever it is, reach out to me. I am an open book, even if it's like personal stuff, talking about the cancer or, being a military spouse. Reach out. I'm happy to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rachel, so much for coming on the spouse angle. This was so lovely chatting with you. And I know a lot of people will find your story inspiring and helpful. So thanks again.